Statistically speaking, Lewis Hamilton is the greatest driver of all time. We have seen years and years worth of incredible drives, unbelievable comebacks, and utterly dominant performances. Which is why in 2024, when it was announced that Lewis Hamilton would be joining Ferrari, I, as a Ferrari fan, was incredibly excited to see what could actually happen. We were seeing potentially the greatest team lineup of all time, with Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton finally coming together. But it has to be said, in 2025, there was a lot of problems and a lot of things just didn't work, both with Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton, which is why in today's video I'm going to be talking about why Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari must improve in 2026. If you enjoy the video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. But now, let's get into the video. Now, I understand Ferrari was not at its best in 2025 in terms of the car and its performances. They spent most of the races having to lift and coast, and whenever there was a long corner, it was trying to throw them off to the nearest wall. But you cannot deny that the 2025 season for Lewis Hamilton was, well, quite a bit disappointing. And well, it was just very underwhelming. It was clear very early on into the season that there was going to be some readjustment time, which makes sense. He spent many years at Mercedes and has spent his entire F1 career being powered by a Mercedes engine. So changing to Ferrari power and an Italian team was always going to be an uphill task. Therefore, early on, it kind of made sense. We also saw Carlos Sainz have a bit of a slow start to the season in the Williams. However, Sainz ended the season with 2 podiums, and Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, became the first Ferrari driver in 44 years to spend a full season with the team and fail to score a single podium. No, I'm not going to count the win in China at the sprint race because, well, it's a sprint race and they don't really count. Also, of course, the car was disqualified the very next day in the Grand Prix. But, as I said, readjustment time was required, which is fine, except as the season progressed, Lewis Hamilton's performances didn't really start to show many signs of improvement. In the beginning, Charles Leclerc had a pretty obvious race pace advantage, which made sense. He was used to Ferrari and all of their shenanigans. But Lewis had good pace over one lap, but then in the races he was struggling and had a few races where he was really struggling with the tyres. But again, he was new to the team. As the season started to wear on, Lewis did actually start to close the gap to Charles Leclerc. In fact, between Spain and Silverstone, Hamilton out-qualified Charles Leclerc 3 times out of 4, and it was starting to look great. Then at Spa, Hamilton went out in Q1. And after that, he would not out-qualify Charles Leclerc for the rest of the season. In the races, Lewis Hamilton only beat Charles Leclerc 3 times all season long. But again, it was only his first season with the team. To make matters worse for Lewis Hamilton, the end of the season was, well, pretty terrible and very forgetful. In the last 3 races, Lewis Hamilton went out in Q1 every single time. Overall, in 2025, Lewis Hamilton had 4 Q1 eliminations in Grand Prix conditions. That is more Q1 eliminations than Alonso, Carlos Sainz, and also Isaac Hadjar. Speaking of Hadjar, Hadjar also had more Q3 appearances than Lewis Hamilton in 2025. To compare that to his teammate, Charles Leclerc made Q3 every single time, apart from at one race weekend where Charles Leclerc went out in Q2 instead. One lap pace in the last few years has not really been Lewis Hamilton's strong point, and that is an area where he absolutely must improve, especially when the cars are close. In a way, it might not be as important in 2026 because with the rule changes, we're likely to see a larger field spread, which means there will be bigger gaps between the teams. But even so, Lewis Hamilton cannot afford to have his qualifying sessions being compromised and compromising his Grand Prix by, well, starting in 15th place, because it doesn't matter how good you are, if you're constantly down in 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, your Grand Prix results are not going to be too spectacular. I just want to say, if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. But now, let's get back to the video. Lewis also needs to improve in race trim going into 2026. Part of Lewis Hamilton's prowess in the Mercedes days was his ability during Grand Prix to look after the tyres and maintain a brilliant race pace. In 2025, Lewis was not only struggling over one lap, but generally in the races, his pace was not fantastic. There have been multiple races where we saw Lewis Hamilton lose a lot of ground over Charles Leclerc, even when they were next to each other in terms of race position. Now, I will give Lewis some benefit of the doubt, as it was his first year with Ferrari, but next year with brand new cars, brand new tyres, there's not really any excuses for Lewis Hamilton to not be able to match Charles Leclerc in terms of race pace. After all, Lewis Hamilton is the greatest driver of all time statistically. But I don't want to just harper on Lewis Hamilton and say he needs to improve. After all, Ferrari have had a shocking year in 2025, and they really do need to improve as a team, especially if this relationship between Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari is to have any success whatsoever. So, let's get into it. In 2025, Ferrari were absolutely atrocious when it came to the amount of lift and coast that they needed to do, due to constantly having brake issues. This is an issue that must be fixed if they want to compete against the likes of McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes consistently. In a way, at least, I guess, it is a good thing that the drivers were getting used to doing a lot of lift and coast, given the Grand Prix in 2026 are likely to feature a lot of lift and coasting, so maybe they were just practicing for the new regulations a little bit early. Another area where they need to improve is their ability of adapting to the car to run in different conditions. We have seen so many times how Ferrari was just not able to adapt and cannot for the life of them think on their feet with different strategies. Whenever it rains, Ferrari has been awful. Lewis Hamilton was historically known as a fantastic wet weather driver, but when it rained this season, we saw multiple times how both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton really struggled in the wet, and we have seen that during most of the ground effect era. We even saw Carlos Sainz really struggle in the wet during the Ferrari stint, with crashes for example at Suzuka in 2022, and also Brazil in 2024, multiple times. Strategy-wise, we have seen for years Ferrari have been pretty awful. There was a portion in 2024 where it was starting to look better, but in parts of 2025, we have seen them fall back into bad habits, especially at Silverstone and also potentially Budapest. But again, that could have been down to them not really getting the car right for the Grand Prix, and they were risking disqualification. Setup-wise, the Ferrari has a tiny operating window, and when they are not exactly in that window, the Ferrari pace drops massively. We saw in Qatar, for example, how the Ferrari was just not good enough. The car balance was just awful, and we saw it constantly trying to throw both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton off track. The long medium speed corners saw their car really struggle. The car was perfectly fine when there was a lot of slow speed and heavy braking zones. It's why they were good at Monaco, Austria, Mexico and Budapest. Until of course that final pit stop that cost Charles Leclerc a lot of time, after he came back out on track and all of a sudden suspiciously had no pace. But when there were some higher speed corners and longer corners such as Miami and Qatar, we saw the Ferrari car be exposed. Next year, the car needs to have a better balance and not be in a position where it's trying to spit their drivers off track all of the time. In 2026, the brand new power units means that there is an opportunity for Ferrari to gain and jump their rivals. And well, for Ferrari, if there's one area where they tend to be good, and occasionally break the rules to get some sort of advantage, it is in the power unit department. But Ferrari need to improve operationally and stop being so Italian. It is possible for them to be a great team if the team is not run like a business and instead it is run as a race team. And honestly, I think this is where it's really hurting Ferrari. It is nothing like the era of Jean Todt and Ross Brawn when they were absolutely dominating everything. And it's due to how the team is run. It's not run as a race team like Red Bull or even McLaren or Mercedes, and it's really going to hurt them, and I think it's going to hurt them in the new era as well. They may start off strong like they did in 2022, but they may just find themselves constantly get worse and worse and worse once again. But those are my thoughts on Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton. Both parties need to improve in quite a lot of areas if this is going to work out for them. Also, with Charles Leclerc, you have to remember there are options for him starting to open up. And if Ferrari doesn't get their act together, then we might see them lose both Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. But those are my thoughts. Do you agree? In the comment section down below, please do let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like and subscribe for more F1 content.